why that might be and how that works, as far as using certain terms and not others? Your supposedly objective criteria?
You have certain words that you'll associate with like men or women or like different religions or different races. And so if you can identify what those terms are and like learn how they're used, you can make sure that you avoid them and try
Right.
not to let it affect you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we tend to have certain implicit associations with words and attitudes with certain groups, right? That may make us think that when those words are used, then someone from that group is more appropriate for that position or better at that task. So this is one of the reasons that's sometimes brought up as a possible explanation for some of the gender disparity in philosophy. We often talk about attacking people's arguments and use combative language, which tends to be more associated with men. So then we think, well, he's a man, so he's going to be better at attacking, right? Whereas actually, it's the word associations that are, and the biases that are coming in with that are doing the work rather than any facts about the way people are, the way people do philosophy, right? Make sense? Is there anything, so those are some of the So the other thing I want to do, that's the suggestions for particularly mitigating gender bias in reviews in science. But I think it's helpful to think about the way that works more generally, thinking about ways to mitigate bias. Let's go through quickly the biases that we had from the chart and the debiasing techniques, they call them there. So the first one we have is hypothesis myopia. So these are more targeted towards the actual doing of science rather than the looking at it of science. So hypothesis myopia is collecting evidence to support a hypothesis and not looking for evidence against it and ignoring other explanations. And so what's going on there is we're basically picking and choosing evidence for a hypothesis that we've already decided is correct or that we want to be correct, without looking for contradictory data on the one hand or possible explanations that fit the data or the phenomena better than our initial hypothesis. You see why that might happen. Generally, you're hypothesizing about something, and you want to go test it, and you kind of want to be right. The next one we have is the Texas sharpshooter effect. Remember what that is? It works.
Taking a random pattern of data and trying to find a grouping of it artificially. So the example in there was that somebody takes his gun and shoots the side of a barn multiple times and then draws the target around it and shows that he is a great sharpshooter because everything that he shot hit right in the bullseye.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is something that's particularly relevant when we have large, complex data sets, right? We have a huge amount of information. It's easy to identify patterns where there aren't real effects, just random groupings of data points or something like that, right? And if those groupings then make it look like our hypothesis is more likely to be true, we'll consider them to be some good evidence rather than just random patterns. Asymmetric attention is the next one. Rigorously checking unexpected results, but giving expected ones a free pass. See what they're getting at there?
So it's like evidence that doesn't agree with their hypothesis or theory, they'll like look over again and be like, oh, well, this could have like made it wrong, or this could have affected it. Whereas if it supports them, they're just like, oh yeah, see, I'm right. Instead of looking at it again and saying, oh, well, actually, the same thing that affected the last one could have affected this one, or something else could have.
Exactly. The thought is, if we get results that confirm our hypothesis, then we're much less likely to go and double check our arithmetic and analysis and whatnot, than if our results are disconfirmatory. Tend to always go back and check if we get something unexpected, but if we get what we want, we're not going to check our methods. Last one we've got here is just so storytelling. This is essentially the same as the post hoc fallacy that we talked about last week, possibly. So what's going on here? Just so storytelling. Someone from the right side of the room happen to remember what this is? My right, that is. Stage right. No? Okay, anyone else? Just so storytelling? So this is when we get certain results or certain evidence, and then we hypothesize about it after the fact. This isn't always bad, but it turns out as humans we're really good at coming up with explanations for patterns that we happen to see, without there being good reasons for those explanations other than the fact that they happen to fit the data. So something, I mean, this is a worry in science, but also just more generally, related to another thing that we often do as humans, which is confabulate. Like, aware of the term confabulation? My favorite word. It's fun to say. It's when you come up with an explanation for your own behavior after the fact. So after you've acted, somebody asks you why'd you do that, and then you give an explanation, even though that you didn't consciously act for that reason. So that's the same sort of behavior as this just so storytelling, but in more specific context. So finally, let's go through these debiasing techniques again. We went through them fairly quickly in class. So devil's advocacy, explicitly consider alternative hypotheses and then test them head to head. So how might this help? How might we go about it?
It can help you see the arguments that the other side will have, and then if you can find like a way to combat them, which is a bad word, but if you can find a way to talk about them and negate the arguments that they would have given, your argument becomes stronger.
Yeah, that's part of it, certainly. Anyone else want to add something?
it may also cause you to change your opinion if you've been raised believing one thing your whole life and then you play devil's advocate for a day and suddenly see things their way and see that your evidence may be biased or your evidence may not be valid.
Right, good. So that's how it's gonna play out more generally in everyday life. But in the scientific context, we're particularly thinking of, we've got our hypothesis, that's presumably explaining some phenomenon or some phenomena out in the real world. And if we just focus on that one hypothesis, we might miss a better explanation for those phenomena, right? So we want to go back and look at other plausible hypotheses and test them as well, see if they fit the data better than